What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 133 of the Noizze Podcast, part of the Noizze Podcast Network and sponsored by Satanic Co. I'm your host, your boy, Chris Pugh, and as ever, I'm joined by my very good friend and Mr. Cynical himself, Samuel Lewis. Mate, how are we?
We are very well. We are very, very well today. It's been a good day. It's excellent to see you once again.
Mate, what a duo of albums we've got to talk about today.
This is going to be my favourite podcast of the year, I think.
I tell you what, in terms of duo album reviews, it's been a while since I've sat down here and been as excited as I am now. And that's with me saying that's off the back of, last week we did Spanish Love Songs and Holding Absence, two bands who I really big fans of. So yeah, today is a great day to exist in the metal sphere. Let's tell you why that is. With a Noizze Podcast, we're a fortnightly, at the very least, rock or metal podcast that will discuss news, album reviews, etc. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, basically anywhere you get your podcasts. Me and Sam will be there. The best way to support us is by liking / subscribing, depending on whichever service you may use. That is by far the best thing you can do for us, and thank you to all that have done that so far. We're sponsored by Satanic Co. We're going to leave more about those in that brand and band in our description, but in a nutshell, death metal band that sells you tea and coffee. Let's go. What else could you possibly want? And you can follow us on Twitter at Noizze Podcast. Both me and Sam run that account. So let's move on to our closing topic of the show, Sam. The new Sylosis album, A Sign of Things to Come, is out September 8th via Nuclear Blast Records. It's a British metal band's sixth album and the follow-up to 2020's Cycle of Suffering, album I loved very much. Really enjoyed that record. Sam, let's just address the elephant in the room here. Sylosis, a band synonymous with Josh Middleton. Josh Middleton is the guitarist, vocalist, and pretty much songwriter, to my understanding, of Sylosis. Josh Middleton, of course, formerly now of Architects, Sam. Now, that can't really be a theme as we talk about this album review in terms of like what Josh was doing in Architects, because Josh in Sylosis existed actually before Architects even started. I think Sylosis started in like 2000 or sometime around the turn of the century. Architects didn't start till somewhat after that. So if anything, Architects was Josh's side project. Do you know what I mean? Like he never really quit or disbanded Sylosis. They just kind of went on hiatus while he was working with Architects, and then he still released Cycle of Suffering when Architects went on their break. But Josh Middleton, within I think about 3 months ago now, actually officially left Architects, just citing different going in different musical directions, etc. So I'm only going to make one comment about Architects in link to this album, Sam. When you listen to this,
yeah,
how many points were there where you thought, God, this riff would have been dead good on Architects? I'd love it if Josh Middleton I really love it if Josh Middleton was allowed to write these riffs for Architects.
Honestly, zero. I listened.
You didn't think of that once?
Nah. I listened to this record and I thought he sounds like he's having a great time here.
There wasn't a part of you that thought, God, I wish Josh Middleton was still allowed to write what he wants to write for Architects.
Not really, no. Not really.
Right,
I don't think.
Sorry, go
on. I don't think the type of metal band Architects are would have suited the kind of riffs that he's putting in here or guitar.
Well, yeah, sorry. Perhaps I haven't explained myself well enough. That's kind of what I'm saying. Like, obviously, Josh Middleton isn't going to write these riffs for Architects now because this isn't the line that Architects are pursuing. What I'm trying to say is, for me, listening to this album, knowing that Josh was in Architects and knowing what Josh had kind of come out with for Architects on for those that wish to exist on Doomsday, etc. I felt like, given free reign and given a world where Josh Middleton's vision and Dan Searle's vision meet in the middle, I'd love to have still seen Josh doing Sylosis as well as Architects and not have to just do Sylosis because Architects no longer meet him in the middle in terms of his creative vision, which obviously Architects and Dan Searle is entitled to do. It's their band, it's their creative vision. When I listened to this, I would have been remiss to not think, man, I wish Josh Middleton was kind of meeting up with like their visions met in the middle to still allow Josh to write these types of riffs for Architects.
Yeah, I understand that. I would like to hire Josh Middleton out to write riffs for lots of different bands based on this. I'd be great if you could get Josh Middleton to write for a few modern metal bands over the last few years. He's clearly just a superb musician.
He's amazing.
He's a superb traditional metal musician as well. In a world where those traditions, like, you know, guitar solos and traditional guitar harmonies and that type of stuff, isn't as strong as a feature as it has been in years past, and that becomes almost like a specialist skill in comparison. But the thing is, the reason that I don't think, I wish Josh was back in Architects, even with the caveat that I understand if you could insert Josh into 2018 Architects and just keep that going for a decade, that would probably give you 4 great albums. Even then, he wouldn't have the kind of freedom that he's enjoyed here that seems to get the best out of him as a guitarist and a songwriter. And I'm just glad that he has that here. It's reminiscent of the Megadeth, Dave Mustaine, Metallica thing, where it's like people are like, I wish you could just replace Kirk Hammett with Dave Mustaine. How sick would Metallica albums be? Cool. But do you not like Megadeth when he could just do what he wants? And then you also get Metallica. Isn't that really good? Isn't it great that we have both Coca-Cola and Pepsi? You know, you can just listen to them both whenever you like. And the way that I feel about Sylosis is that even with all the will in the world, Architects were never going to be the kind of long-standing guitar-led metal band that Josh needed to sort of do this type of stuff. Because even at their All Our Gods Have Abandoned Us modern misery style peak, they weren't writing songs really with the kind of dexterity traditional metal stuff that Josh clearly enjoys. They just dipped their toe in enough of it for him to be able to do that at the same time. Whereas this, they've just kind of built the whole thing around his talents, it seems, and he's good enough to carry a band just based on that, it sounds like, because this is absolutely astonishing.
Well, he's the lead songwriter for Sylosis. A lot of it is him,
really.
Yeah, because it's amazing, isn't it?
Good decision. Good decision by all, I think. Really, really sound.
Yeah, I just to be really clear, like there wasn't a part of me that's like, I wish Josh Middleton was still in Architects, because again, like Josh Middleton left Architects because he wanted to pursue Sylosis and hit the creative vision that he wanted, which of course I want him to do. I want him to be where he's going to have the most fun and have the most enjoyment. But I guess in a parallel universe, there's a world where Architects' vision still aligns with Josh's ability to write these unbelievable metal riffs, like Mortal After All, for example, on Holy Hell. The riff that Josh writes for that song is unbelievable. There's a parallel universe where Josh still has Sylosis to do this, and has still got the same creative vision as Dan Searle in Architects, where Josh's metal riffs suit where Dan wants to go, because Josh is so talented that I feel like him not being in Architects is kind of damning for the future. But this isn't an Architects review, and it's not an Architects discussion. It's a discussion on A Sign of Things to Come by Sylosis. Deadwood and A Sign of Things to Come, the title track of both singles, Sam. So let's just get started with Pariahs, which has this like rampaging metal drum beat that you'd expect from like Mario Duplantier from Gojira. Josh's voice kind of tears through this technical riffing. The pinch, me and you love a pinch harmonica, mate. And that the pinch harmonica is the break out of the chorus by Josh as a thing of beauty. And the track like kind of constantly builds this kind of snapping drum snare fill that eventually culminates in this huge breakdown. You can melt the Arctic within a second's notice. And then you get like a stunning solo as well that breaks through the mix towards the end of the song. Pariahs, I think, is emblematic of everything this album is. Just metal, and it's kind of like modern metal blended with the classic elements of thrash metal, with then the added elements of technicality. I'd imagine for someone who understands music in the way that you do, an album as technically proficient as this must have been like the greatest ice cream flavor you've ever discovered in your life.
Yeah, I wrote, this is exactly what I want in a metal album after about a minute of Pariahs. So yeah, pretty much, yeah. My jaw dropped at the guitar solo on this song. Like I was just like stunned at how amazing this is. Like the musicianship on this is really second to none for this type of genre. You're right, it quite easily breaks from a thrashy up tempo stuff to the four to the floor, heavy hard rock style, but with that like sort of metal riffs over the top stuff. And they're able to constantly veer back and forth with that on this. The last minute of Pariahs is just incredible, absolutely incredible. And it just continues like Poison for the Lost, thrashy open. The pauses for another like face melting solo. There was a rotating riff at the end that felt very sort of like Trivium-y, very sort of like peak Metallica, kind of like the way that they vary and tweak riffs every couple of bars to keep things sort of going and sort of keep things intricate. It was really, really, really terrific. And if I'm comparing metal bands to those kind of groups, then I think we sort of know the world I'm living in terms of the way that I sort of feel about this album. Like we talked about the Fatal Line on Polaris, listening to the track Descent, which felt like a nice chunky album track, really. But the slow solo run for the final chorus is beautiful, and it even reminded me that even the album tracks on this album have moments where they feel really special, and have moments where they feel really impactful. And then it kicks into Absent, right? And the melodic open on Absent, you could have closed my eyes and told me Rob Flynn and Machine Head with that kind of slow, clean, melodic singing building up. And again, we are talking rarefied air for classic metal bands. If we're talking about Metallica, Machine Head, Trivium levels of songwriting here, it's really great. A great explosion with the classic solo. I could go on for track by track, but every song on this album has either a thrashy punch that sort of lifts the adrenaline, or it's got a really powerful ballad or a big chorus or an extraordinary section of riff work. I mean, like just the level of some of the riffs on this overall as an album, there's got to be like 50 different figures on this album of real quality, of real impact, and the way that they're able to slide from one to the other seamlessly, from a riff construction standpoint to a songwriting construction standpoint, and also condense these in largely where no song is really more than 5 minutes or so is an incredible feat. Usually bands sort of have to faff around a bit to transition from one to another, and that's how you end up with 6 or 7 minute tracks when really the main body of the song is maybe 4 or 5. But the way that Sylosis writes such efficient thrash and metalcore and really traditional metal songs in this manner, with this amount of aggression, with some real moments of melody which weren't there on Cycle of Suffering to the same extent, it does feel like they've matured as songwriters as well. Not only is Josh Middleton completely justified in any of the decisions that he's made to lead to the creation of this album and development of this album, this Sylosis is a standalone band rather than the Stone Sour to Architect Slipknot is a real possibility here, because this is like Polaris. This is a metal album of the year contender quite comfortably.
I think that theoretically, this is pretty much every single. You mentioned it at the start of your review. Every single thing you can want from a metal album is in this album. I think something great will have to happen for there to be a better modern metal album this year than this.
I agree. I agree with that. If Killswitch brought out this album, you just took the Sylosis name off and put Killswitch Engage on this. What are we saying about this
Yeah.
album? What are the metal
Well,
audience saying about this
that's
album?
a great question.
If you just
Is
take the label off,
that's
you
a
make
great
this the
question.
Killswitch
That is,
record.
if
We're saying
Killswitch,
we're saying this is one of the albums of the decade. We're saying Killswitch Engage are back. The return of the kings of metalcore, and we're like, this is the album that's going to break them through. Add this to all their other back catalogue, and it's a career-defining late renaissance.
yeah, you know what? If Killswitch Engage releases his album, Sam, I'm saying this is the best thing they've done since As Daylight Dies, which was 2006.
So in reverse, then, this is one of the great melodic metal albums since As Daylight Dies, just by sort of connection, right? That's what this means, surely.
Yeah, you know what? It sounds like a really bold statement, doesn't it? That this is one of the great modern metal albums since 2006. But you know what? I think it might actually be. Like, because, and what really kind of cemented for me just how great this album was is the closing duo of Thorns and A Godless Throne. Because I think Thorns, from what I've heard of Sylosis, Thorns has the greatest moment I've encountered from Sylosis, because the track builds to this pause and it succumbs into this huge sprawling solo section that's equal parts technical, emotional, forceful. It's this delicious piece of songwriting that just demands to be played live with strobe lights all over Josh. And he's not one to demand center stage, but if Thorns becomes a staple live, the way that solo section breaks out and the technicality and the emotion and the force of it, like that, I could just Josh has to be center stage while that happens. And A Godless Throne is just a superb way to close a record. It takes every component that's worked from the album previously in terms of tonality, punch, vocals, huge choruses, and gives it the best version of all of them in this huge, punishing yet rewarding 5 minutes. It's really difficult to look at this record and not just be kind of overwhelmed by what it brings to the table in terms of this kind of unpredictable but also unrelenting, like, metal perfectionist edge. Like, it will have this really like snappy, acidic, harsh metal guitar tone and then switch into a blasting solo for 30 seconds, fall into a chorus, extend into a breakdown, fall into an anthemic climax. It's this album, it sprints around, it's like a greyhound chasing the hare, just sprinting around on complete, it's complete chaos for 35, 40 minutes. But at its core and its heart, it's just this beautifully written, superbly crafted, brilliantly executed modern metal excellence.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. And listen to the conclusion of Godless Throne with that melodic chorus, which somehow managed to combine some harsh and some scratchy sounds to that vocal as well, sort of, so it doesn't feel entirely inauthentic and contrived in really any way. Feels like a real moment for the band in the midst of all the musicality and the technicality and how impressive this is as a project and how terrific this is just a pure metal album sort of sense of achievement. It's been a while since I've heard a metal album that combines the riff work with the guitar solos, with the choruses, with the breakdowns, and the song construction simultaneously. And if I wasn't following this with the Polaris record earlier, I would have said I haven't heard that being done this well all year. But having these two records back to back is sort of a boon, really, because they're both going to be neck and neck for me in terms of album of the year. And I really do feel that this could be a really big album for Sylosis in terms of the way that they're considered in their metal circles. They're already an incredibly well-respected band anyway. But I think this could be a real platform finder for them, because Cycle of Suffering was an incredible metal album. It was a really interesting and really engaging metal album. But if you weren't like me and you, which are like riff lords or like a guitarist and stuff, you could argue that it leaves a little bit of desire in terms of the overall songs and the size of the choruses and that type of stuff. It doesn't necessarily like sort of straddle the connection that you need between all of the metal with also you need to be able to get into the average punter as well if you want to sort of increase your size, as we were talking earlier. This, I feel, does that. It contains enough of the melody, it contains enough size, it contains enough absolute sort of weight, with while maintaining the blueprint of what makes them incredibly successful and centering their songwriting around Josh's fairly incredible guitar skills and songwriting there. This is astonishingly good. This is astonishingly good. If we were for what the genre this sits in, for what your expectations are, for what this is kind of album this is supposed to be, and all this type of stuff. You know, I'm not saying this is like Sergeant Pepper's or whatever, but in the confines of like what I expect a metal album to be, it's hard pressed to tell this is anything other than a 9 or a 10 out of 10 metal album. Just purely, what do you want from a great metal record? I mean, it ticks every box, every ingredient in the recipes in here. I don't think I want to walk away from this saying this is like historically impactful. But I mean, like if I want to hand somebody, this is just an A grade, top of the line, blue chip metal record. This is what a great metal record sounds like. This is one of the things that you could hand off to someone without any issue whatsoever. It is really a superb achievement.
I think you've summed up the album phenomenally there. There's just one extra thing from me. I think Josh's vocals are the best they've ever sounded for my money on this album. His riffing is as excellent as ever. But he's never done anything other than excellent riffs in his entire time as a musician. But the songwriting, for my money, is the best that I've encountered from Sylosis as well. So I'm just we'll close off with that comment from you, really, and me just adding that in, that this is vocally the best Josh has been, and it's in terms of his songwriting craft, it's the best he's been as well. This is a phenomenal metal album. This is like you bump into like your friend who you know likes metal, asking them whether they've heard this yet, kind of album.
Yeah, definitely.
That's where we're going to leave episode 133 of the Noizze podcast. Thank you very much if you are still here. We are going to be away for 2 weeks and then back with our standard episode. Remember to follow, /like, /subscribe, depending on whichever service you are using. You can follow us on Twitter at Noizze Podcast. And remember to check out our sponsor, Satanic. We're going to check out the review list and see what we've got coming up in a couple of weeks' time. That is when we'll be back. Thank you. Remember to like, /subscribe. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. We love you. Bye.